to start off by citing an example of moral disagreement that recently has been in the news. Have any of you heard the hubbub that's going on about what the Pope said concerning blessing gay marriages?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just try to explain a little bit why the Pope can't change his position on that. He really does not have any wiggle room at all. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't do it. And the reason goes back to 2,000 years of Christian history. Okay, so let me just cite the essentials that are involved in this debate. Now, our culture is evolving in terms of its moral norms. You all know that. They're evolving, they're changing. What is acceptable today is different than what was acceptable even 20 or 30 years ago. So things are changing. And one of the reasons things are changing is because culturally, we tend to believe that everyone has the right to choose their own self-identity. Everyone can choose who they are, right? No one else should have the right to tell you who you are and what you should do as long as you don't hurt another person. So what the Pope is up against here is the fact that certain norms have been set for the Christian church that started all the way back to the apostles. When the Apostle Paul wanted to clarify with the Jerusalem church, which was headed by the brother of Jesus, his name was James, and Peter and John, the disciples, were still there in Jerusalem at the time. So Paul goes to Jerusalem, and the reason he goes there is because he wants to make sure that everybody is in agreement that Gentiles can become Christians without the necessity of conforming to Jewish law. In other words, they don't have to become circumcised if they're male. They don't have to observe food laws. They don't have to observe the laws of dress. They don't have to set themselves apart from other people. All of these things. Paul wanted to make sure that the mother church in Jerusalem was on board with his message that what unites Christians is their common faith in Christ, not a set of moral norms that were expressed in the book of Leviticus or in the Torah. So basically, the agreement the apostles came to was the following. Peter, James, and John agreed that Gentiles should be allowed to become Christians without becoming Jews. But they insisted on a couple of things. Now, one of these is not relevant. One of the agreements was that Paul would raise a certain amount of money because the Jerusalem church was so poor. So he agreed that he would raise money among the Gentiles and bring it back to Jerusalem. That's what got him into trouble, by the way, when he went back with this bag of money for the Jerusalem church, and he tried to go into the Jewish temple. It raised a ruckus because Jewish elders at the time knew that Paul was preaching a message that denied the validity of the Jewish law for salvation. So he was arrested and eventually ended up in Rome. But the other agreements was that the Gentiles would conform to Jewish norms concerning marriage and sexuality. They absolutely insisted on that, which means basically simply this, that that Gentiles will have no more than one wife. Okay, we're not going to allow multiple wives, and that the nuclear family, what we call the nuclear family, will be preserved. Man, woman, children. That's what they insisted on. Okay, so that became the norm for the Christian church at the very outset. But then over time, okay, the theologians got involved in all these issues. And Thomas Aquinas in particular in the 12th century, he maintained that the moral law, as it's embodied in the Ten Commandments, okay, we're not talking about dietary laws or any of those other laws now, we're just talking about the Ten Commandments. The moral law, Aquinas held, is written on the conscience of every person. And he cited the Apostle Paul, Romans chapter 2, I believe it's verse 15, where Paul says that even the Gentiles know what the moral norms are because it is written on their hearts or on their conscience. We instinctively know right from wrong, just like we instinctively know 2 + 2 is 4. So, for example, if someone steals your car, there's no question. Nobody says, "Oh, that's just fine. Let the person steal your car." Everybody knows that's wrong. Or if someone gets mad at their neighbor and clubs them over the head, everybody knows that's wrong. You don't have to argue the point. You already know that's wrong, right? Well, why do we know all of these things are wrong? Why do we know it's wrong to steal? It's wrong to lie. It's wrong to murder. It's wrong to commit adultery. Children ought to care for their elderly parents. Why do we know these things? I mean, for example, if you knew of a child who had an elderly mother who was ill, and the only thing the child cared about was the inheritance that he was going to get, what would you think of that person?
A highly bad person.
Yeah. We wouldn't be impressed with their moral position, right? Okay, why not? Because we instinctively know it's wrong not to care for your elderly mother who's sick. Everybody knows that. There's not a culture on the planet that doesn't know that. Okay, so when people say, well, moral norms are relative to the culture you're looking at. Well, in fact, that is partially true in that some moral norms are different depending on which culture you're studying. But anthropologists have found that there are certain universal norms that every culture conforms to. And these include what we call the second table of the law in the Ten Commandments, the commandments having to do with our relationship with other people. Okay, so So according to Thomas Aquinas, this is the way he expressed this. He said that just as there are laws of nature, okay, like gravity. If I stand on a cliff and decide to jump off, I don't have a choice. I'm going to fall to the ground. I have no choice in the matter. It is a law of nature. Or if I eat some food that is spoiled in some way, I'm going to get sick. I don't have a choice in the matter. It's because of natural law. It's going to happen like it or not. Okay, well, just as there are laws that govern nature, there are laws that govern human behavior. And this he calls natural law. Okay? Natural law, which goes, like I say, all the way back to the apostles themselves. In fact, Paul, when he wrote Romans, he condemned certain behavior on the part of the Romans because he says they already know that what they're doing is wrong because it's written in their conscience. And if you violate another person, if you hurt another person, or you violate another person's dignity and self-respect, everybody knows that's wrong. You don't have to argue the point any more than you have to argue 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? Why is that? Well, because the moral law is built into us. It's a part of who we are. And further, to help explain, what this means, you might say that human beings are unique creatures in that we have one foot in nature. We have physical bodies that have to conform to the laws of nature. But we also have a spiritual or moral side to us that other creatures don't have. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of what makes us human. Okay, we can make choices. A dog can't make choices. Yesterday, I was in the office manager's office, and I was eating my yogurt. Well, she had her little dog there, and that dog sat with one arm up, or one leg up and one leg, and he looked at me like, when are you going to give me some of your food? Okay. And he did that while I ate an entire bowl of yogurt. He was still, sort of, well, I knew that the dog wasn't making a choice. The dog was following his instinct. Just like a lion has an instinct. I don't know if any of you like to watch nature movies. I do. And I've seen countless film of animal behavior on the African savanna, where there are all kinds of creatures, right? Herd of wildebeest comes along. Guess who shows up? It's Mama Lion. It's built into Mama Lion to go get one of those wildebeests in order to feed herself and the pack of lions. There's a pack of them. But then after Mama Lion kills the wildebeest, along comes Papa Lion. Papa Lion doesn't do a thing. He's taking a nap under the tree. Mm-hmm. But when Papa Lion shows up, all of the Mama Lions disappear because he's in charge. Now, are they making choices? No, that's instinct. All right. But human beings, we can make choices, right? So the moral law while it's built into us, nevertheless, because we can make choices, we can violate the moral law. We can't violate the laws of nature. You know, I can't fly when I jump off a cliff, right? But suppose someone is standing in front of me and they argue that all moral norms are relative and don't impose your beliefs on me. Okay, suppose this person is arguing with me and telling me that all morality is relative. There's no such thing as objective standards of right and wrong. And then suppose I react by hitting the person in the face. Well, immediately he's going to object. He's either going to hit me back or he's going to say, you should not have done that, right? Well, wait a minute. If all moral laws are relative, then why can't I punch you in the nose? How do you know that's wrong? You just told me that all moral standards are relative. So I feel like punching you in the face. Right away, you've already won the argument because that person is not going to say that what I did was right because everybody knows it's wrong. Okay, so let's go back to the Pope. According to Roman Catholic tradition, marriage was an institution that was preordained by our Creator when He made human beings male and female. Now, the Pope was not bashing gay people. He was not doing that. The Pope believes you love your neighbor as yourself, no matter who that person is. So he was not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that gay people are bad. That's not the issue. The issue is, can the church bless a marriage between two men or two women? That's the issue. And the Pope can't do that because according to Christian tradition, the Creator preordained male and female for the purposes of marriage and reproduction. So that for the Pope is an ought, not a maybe, not a law that, well, you know, we need to elevate ourselves and conform to the changing mores of the time. We need to catch up with the rest of the culture. Well, that makes no sense to a person who is responsible to uphold 2,000 years of tradition, and that says that part of what the church believes is moral and right is built in to the creation by the Creator, and that is male and female marriage. Okay, so no matter whether you agree or disagree with the Pope, obviously, you know, the ELCA disagrees with that because Lutherans, ELCA Lutherans, not Missouri Synod Lutherans, ELCA Lutherans do bless gay marriages, right? We made that decision in 2009 at a national convention of our church. So prior to that, the rule was that a gay person could be ordained, but the church expected that person to remain celibate because the church at that time held that homosexual behavior was not allowed according to Christian tradition and moral norms. But in 2009, at an assembly of the ELCA, a vote was taken, and that was changed. So that now what the norm is that a gay person, as long as they have a monogamous relationship, okay? So the ELCA is still trying to, in some way, embody the norms that have been set for the Christian church from the very beginning. But they don't want to say that a gay person should remain celibate. So what they decided was a gay person who is in a monogamous relationship is acceptable for ordination. Okay? And then pastors were told that they can bless gay marriages if they so choose. Pastors don't have to do that. If it violates your conscience, you don't have to do it, but you're free to do it if you so choose. All right? For the Roman Catholic Church, forget it. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. This is set in stone. It's permanent, and it's never going to change. Okay? So when the Pope said no to blessing gay marriage, a lot of people denounced him as a homophobe or whatever, but that's not what he... Pope Francis, he is not a homophobe. He operates according to the moral norms of the Christian church as they have been passed on from generation to generation for 2,000 years. Okay, it's the same norms that move Pope Francis to advocate for the poor. He is a unique pope in that sense. He's more socially active. He advocates for the poor. He advocates for to other countries to have a kind of a system that will fight against poverty and that sort of thing, care for the dispossessed and so forth. So the Pope, that's also part of the moral norms of the church. You go back and read the Gospels, what does Jesus do? He ministers to people who are sick and dispossessed on the margins of society. And when he's questioned about that, he tells them a parable. Now, one of them is the Parable of Prodigal Son. Remember that one? Okay, the prodigal son goes off and ends up in a pig pen, right? He violated all the moral norms. He asked his father for his inheritance before it was due to him. That was the first norm he broke. Then he went off and wasted the money on prostitution and other things. But because this prodigal son made his way back to his father, that was an act of repentance, right? So Jesus, what he's trying to say in this parable is that he wants to regain and heal all those people who have, because of their own immoral behavior, destroyed their lives. He wants to heal them and bring them back into the fold. Now, that doesn't mean that Jesus condones immoral behavior. Remember the story of the woman who was caught in adultery and brought to him by a crowd who said The law of Moses said she ought to be stoned. What do you say, Jesus? Do you remember what he said?
Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.
Exactly. Exactly. And then what did he say to the woman after the crowd grumbled and walked away?
Go
What
and
did he
sin
say to
no
her?
more. Go and sin
Go
no
and
more.
sin no, exactly. Go and sin no more. Okay? So when people repent, okay, so for Jesus too, breaking the moral norms, he doesn't advocate for that. He doesn't excuse people's behavior, but he does want them to repent so that they can rebuild their lives on a moral foundation that is healthy and that will enable them to thrive rather than end up in a pig pen.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is part of the reason this is complicated for the Catholic Church then because marriage is actually a sacrament for the church as opposed to just a cultural norm in a way, right? It's become sort of a foundation of their faith.
Yeah, I think you're right, Judy. Yeah, that's a good point. Marriage is a sacrament, and how did the Catholic Church come to the conclusion that marriage is a sacrament? That's an excellent point. Okay, the verse they cite for that is in Genesis. When God creates Adam, and he names all the animals, but he doesn't have a helper that is fit for him. He needs a partner. He's lonely. There's nobody fit for him. So God puts him to sleep, takes a rib, and what does he do? He creates woman. And then the verse goes on to say that a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Okay, so according to Catholic interpretation, that means that marriage is an institution that receives a special dispensation of grace from God, so that the union can be preserved. Okay. Luther's view, on the other hand, was that marriage is a calling, just like just like a person feels called to become a doctor or an engineer or whatever it is. Marriage is a calling, according to Luther. Therefore, some people are called to remain single. Of course, we're talking about the Middle Ages now, so there were a lot of monasteries and convents, okay? That doesn't exist so much today, but he lived in a different time. So he said, some people are called to be single, some people are called to marriage. And so it's not a sacrament, according to Luther, but it is an institution that's been preordained by God. He did believe that, based on the same verse I cited. Every child who goes through Lutheran confirmation reads in the small catechism that marriage is an institution ordained by God for the raising of children, etc. Okay, so there are some differences in theological perspective, but on the other hand, whether you think it's a sacrament because God gives a dispensation of grace to the couple getting married, or you think it's a call. In either case, what you're saying is that it's a moral norm that should not be broken. It's built into us by our Creator, and for that reason, the church can't violate that particular norm.
How did the ELCA get so far afield on that?
Okay, so I've been a pastor for 40 years, so I remember the debates. All right. Back when I first moved to California, and the same thing was happening in Maryland when I was there too. So California wasn't unique. California may have been a little bit ahead of other places, but this debate had been going on at synod assemblies for years and years and years. Okay. Pastors, especially activist pastors who live in inner city churches, had been advocating for a change in the church's position on gay marriage for years. All right. And I remember as clearly as if it was yesterday, before the ELCA even existed. Remember, there was the ALC and the LCA? Okay, the LCA, before the merger, came out with a study on the ethics related to homosexuality and gay and lesbian issues. And the bishop asked me, because I was the head of the education committee in Maryland, the Delaware Maryland Synod, to offer a class based on this study that the LCA had submitted. And I remember they went through every verse in the Bible that seems to suggest that gay marriage is not appropriate, that God intended for the marriage to be just man and woman. Okay, so there's a verse in Leviticus related to this. Well, Leviticus is a Jewish document. That's Jewish law. And as Luther pointed out, Jewish law does not apply for Christians. We're free of all that. So the verse in Leviticus was dismissed because that's a part of Jewish law. And then there were several other verses. There's nothing in the Gospels that speak to the issue, except there's an indirect when Jesus was asked about divorce. Okay, and back in those days, a man could divorce his wife, but a wife could not divorce her husband. So Jesus leveled the playing field, and he said, no divorce. And if a man divorces his wife and marries another, he's committing adultery. So most people interpret what he said there as a matter of standing up for the rights of the woman in a marriage, so that it was no longer permissible for a husband to just say, get lost, I found a younger gal, I'm going to go with her. Okay. And that happened a lot. That was common. And then what would happen to those divorced women? Well, the only thing they had was the dowry that was given by the parents of the wife to the husband in the event that there was a divorce or a death so that she had something to live on. That's all she had. But it put divorced women in danger, okay, in danger of poverty and prostitution. So most people believe that Jesus was simply making the moral norm apply both to men and women in the same way. So it was not discriminatory. In other words, men were expected to observe the same moral code as women were. That doesn't really speak directly to the issue of gay marriage, right? Because he never mentions it. He never mentions it. Now, there is a verse in the first chapter of Romans where Paul condemns the emperor's family because they were engaging in sexual orgies.
Yeah.
And he says men had lust for men and women had lust for women. And okay, so many people interpreted that passage to be condemning orgiastic behavior, not just simply a condemnation of gays and lesbians. All right, so that's a disputed text. Other people think that Paul was condemning all homosexual behavior. You know, so there's different interpretations of that text. But in any case, over time, as this debate got hotter and hotter and hotter, and as leadership in the church began to change. In other words, the older Lutheran bishops were retiring and younger people were taking their place. These younger people had different perspectives on the issue. You follow what I'm saying? Okay. So eventually it got to the point where more people were in favor of allowing gay marriage than those who were against it. That happened in 2009. Okay. So so that's where the ELCA is. The Missouri Synod remains totally in agreement with Roman Catholicism. Not that it's a sacrament, but that it's a calling, and that's that. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of what, well, I'm not going to make this a statement. I'm going to make this a question. I mean,
Okay.
2008, you know, you remember that the Supreme Court was, and California Supreme Court, and they were all kind of going back and forth in terms of what proposition was in the ballot. And a lot of the propositions were double negatives, and it was all very confusing. But it was 2008, which basically made gay marriage legal in this country. I would think, I mean, I'm more familiar with the Episcopalian Church, but I think a lot of the impetus was to be consistent with law too, right?
Yeah, that could be, Mariana. You know, I'm not familiar with that particular aspect of it, but you may be right. Yeah.
I mean, Catholics don't worry about that, but
no, they don't. No, the Roman Catholic Church, its moral foundation is set in stone, and that's that. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know. What's the Episcopalian position on this issue?
Oh, yeah, definitely they will marry people.
They will. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, the most recent rector at Transfig was gay. So,
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah.
so, and they picked him, I believe, knowing that. So, but
So-
I do recall when the bishop came out with his statement, and it was, you know, when those court decisions were coming down, just,
Mhm.
you know, he clarified, this is the church's position. And
Yeah.
that was, at least for California, the case.
Yeah.
So.
So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Episcopalians in America are somewhat in conflict with the Anglican Church in general on some of these issues. Is that correct, Marianne? So I've heard that Anglican bishops in Africa and in other places have taken a different position, so that the Anglican Church as a whole is not in agreement with this particular issue.
Yeah, that is right. And that is a problem.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think what I'll call the mother church in England,
Mhm.
you know, I think is more traditional, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting because one of my sons who happens to be gay lived in England for a while when he
Mhm.
was in college, you know, a semester abroad. And he wrote a paper kind of about the issue while he was over there, and said that in some ways it was easier in England because people didn't tend to use the terms wife and husband. They would say partner.
Mhm.
And so then accordingly, people didn't really know, you know, were you talking about a man or a woman, or were you talking about somebody you were illegally connected with, or whatever.
Mhm.
But the church was not consistent with that kind of, I'll call it flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So Canterbury has not come around yet.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I understand.
It would seem that the church should be, just by its nature, be true to its roots. I mean, we were all through the persecutions and everything else. I mean, it was against what the norms were, what the laws were, and all that stuff. I mean, it was Christ's law and not people's laws, you know. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm struggling with as far as whether I agree with the LCA or not. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't mind. People can do what they want to do, but as far as the church sanctioning it, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't care. In fact, we went to a ceremony for two lesbian women, good friends, and I just felt that we should stand by her. But we didn't approve of it
Yeah.
ourselves, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like we're knuckling under, and it's part of the whole collapsing of the family and everything. But that's my opinion, I guess.
Yeah. I understand, Linda. You know, it's a tough issue for a lot of people, and it is. Yeah. I wrote a paper on all the biblical citations to this issue when I was at Faith Lutheran Church in Castro Valley, but I lost track of my paper because at one point I decided to apply to the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley into their PhD program. I felt like all of my work at Faith was done. I had accomplished everything I came there to do, and it was time for them to get a new leader. So I submitted that paper they wanted, as a part of the application, they wanted you to submit an academic paper that you had written. Well, I hadn't been in school for years, so the only thing I had was this, and I submitted it in the application. I should have made a copy of it, but I didn't, so now I don't have it anymore. Through every passage in the Bible and looked at how the church interpreted it through the years, and how many Lutherans changed their interpretation more recently. Okay, that's what the paper was about. Anyway,
Get a computer to do it for you now.
yeah, right. So returning to D'Souza here, I've got a couple minutes left. He asks 3 questions in this chapter, and those questions are: is there a universal and objective morality? In other words, is there such a thing as a morality that's just as objective as the law of gravity, for example? Is there such a thing that there's an objective right and wrong? Is there such a thing? And then he asks, does it have a religious foundation? Or can it be discovered by people who don't believe in God? And then secondly, how can it be known? Okay, those are his 3 questions. Now, his answer to the first question, is there a universal objective morality? He believes there is. His answer to that is yes. Okay, he thinks that all human beings are born with a conscience, and that we intuitively know right from wrong, even though there are variations between cultures. Okay, and he cited a religious convocation. Okay, theologian Hans Kuhn from Germany, he organized a religious convocation present were Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, the whole ball of wax. They were all there, represented. And they tried to hammer out a statement of common beliefs between all the religions. Okay? And as it turns out, there were a lot of common beliefs with respect to right and wrong among all of the religions. For example, they all had some version of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. They all had that. Okay, so I don't know. He doesn't say what all of the agreement was. He just says that they all had an agreement. Okay, and now the next question: does it have a religious foundation? How many of you listen to podcasts? Any of you listen to podcasts?
No.
No? Okay. Well, there's one famous atheist guy. His name is Sam Harris. And he gets on a lot of podcasts that I've listened to, where he debates Christian believers on the issue of morality. Now, you would think that an atheist would not have the foundations for for some kind of moral right and wrong, right? Because as Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian author, put it, if there's no God, then anything goes. So, but Sam Harris wanted to argue that that's not the case, that atheists can have a moral foundation based on reason, based on just thinking things through. All right. But what's interesting about what Sam Harris says is that this notion that Thomas Aquinas had, that morality is written into our conscience. It's part of who we are as human beings. the morality that Sam Harris comes up with is almost exactly the same as traditional Christian moral norms. And even other people who have advocated for unbelief, who don't like religion, get rid of religion, religion is bad. Even they admit that their values and moral norms are basically the same as those of Christianity. Yeah. Okay, so that would seem to suggest that what D'Souza says here about natural law, that moral norms are written on the conscience of every human being, that would seem to suggest that he's right. Okay, now you could either interpret it that way, or you could interpret it as being simply a manifestation of the fact that whether you believe in God or not, you have been raised in a culture that was shaped by Christianity. Western civilization was shaped by Christianity. I think I mentioned to you that at the Nuremberg trials, when the Nazis, their defense was, well, we were just obeying the laws of the land as they existed at that time. And the American prosecutor said, but there's a higher law. There's a law that transcends human law. Now, most people believe that law came from God, but there are people who believe that there's no God, but they keep those values. They also believe in, they also admire Mother Teresa for caring for the poor. They also believe in it's wrong to lie, steal, cheat, and murder and defraud people and so forth. So in terms of morality, they tend to be in sync with Christian believers.
But you had mentioned there was 3 questions, right? One was,
Yeah.
is there universal morality, which we just talked about. And then you said, does this have a religious foundation and can it be discovered? Can you just talk on those quickly?
Okay. D'Souza believes it does have a religious foundation. He cites that convocation of all the religions, okay, and their agreement on moral norms. He cites passages in the Bible, the 10 Commandments, of course, plus what Paul says that even Gentiles know right from wrong, even if they have never been taught the 10 Commandments, they already know that those commandments are the right thing to do. So his answer is yes, he believes it does have a religious foundation, that God created us with moral norms so that we would choose not what we want to do, but what we ought to do. Okay, so suppose you're walking by a lake and some guy is out in the lake struggling because he can't swim and he's about to drown. What would your conscience tell you to do?
Save them.
Save him. Jump in the water and save him. Yeah. Everybody's conscience says that. Now, some people don't obey their conscience, but there's blowback when you don't. Kirsten, I always talk to her about her cases. When I get home, we go for a long walk. I say, okay, how are your patients doing? And there are numerous people who come to her with an extremely guilty conscience, and they don't know what to do about it. Okay, so it's very common. It's more common than you think. And they aren't necessarily religious. Okay, so how can it be known? He says it can be known because, well, in various ways. Number one, if we if we're shaped by you know, the religious foundation of Christianity, for example, then our conscience, you know, will tell us what is right from wrong and so forth. But he also thinks that it can be known because people from all cultures agree on certain basic moral norms. Okay, there's not a culture in the world where murder is a value. There's not a culture in the world that says it's okay to be a coward. There's not a culture in the world that says it's okay to steal or cheat or defraud or whatever. So if you just study human beings and their behavior, you can know the moral law. You can see it in every culture. We'll get into more of this as we move into the next chapter, because the next chapter is about the foundations of all of this. It's about what we call our spirit or our soul. It's chapter 21. It's entitled The Ghost in the Machine, Why Human Beings Are More Than Matter. Okay? We are more than just our bodies. You can't account for human consciousness, freedom of choice, and moral behavior by studying the brain. You just can't account for it in that way. Okay, so that'll be our topic for next week.
It just seems that atheists, if they have this moral aptitude also, that they have nobody to go to get forgiveness when they sin.
No, the only thing an atheist would say is that if they did something that hurt another person, they would say that they in order to find forgiveness, they would go to that person and say, I am sorry for what I did. They would seek forgiveness from the person they hurt. Yeah, not from God, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's a real privilege and joy to see you all today, and I hope I'll see you again next week.
Okay.